The rain hammered against the windows of Martinez and Associates like bullets, each drop a tiny explosion against the glass. It was 11:47 p.m. on a Thursday night and the entire floor should have been empty. Should have been. David Martinez stood frozen in the doorway of the archives room, his hand still on the light switch, staring at a scene that would change everything he thought he knew about his senior project manager, Alex Chen. But let me back up, because this story, it doesn't start with that moment. It starts 6 months earlier with a lie that seemed so small at the time. So Alex, tell us about your wife. Alex Chen felt his stomach drop as the words left Jennifer's mouth. It was his first week at Martinez and Associates, one of the top architectural firms in Seattle, and he was sitting in the break room surrounded by his new colleagues during what was supposed to be a casual, get-to-know-you lunch. His mind raced. He'd been so careful during the interview process, so strategic about his words. He never explicitly said he had a wife, but he also never corrected anyone when they assumed. The wedding band on his finger, his grandmother's ring, worn on that finger because it was the only one it fit, had done the talking for him. She's great, Alex heard himself say, the words tasting like ash. Busy with her own career, we don't get to see each other as much as we'd like. The lie settled into the room like dust, invisible but everywhere. Jennifer beamed. I know exactly what you mean. My husband works in finance and sometimes we're like ships passing in the night. Alex smiled and nodded, hatting himself a little more with each passing second. But he'd worked too hard to get here. At 29, this job was everything he'd been working toward since graduating from MIT, lead architect on sustainable urban development projects. 6 figures, respect. And he couldn't risk losing it. Not in a firm where the senior partners were all straight men over 50. Not when he'd heard the jokes they made about the contractor who'd shown up to a meeting with painted nails. Not when the managing partner, David Martinez himself, had that photo on his desk, him and his picture-perfect wife and 3 picture-perfect children at some picture-perfect beach. So Alex did what he'd been doing since college. He built a wall between who he was and who everyone thought he was, brick by brick, lie by lie. What he didn't know was that walls have a way of crumbling when you least expect it. David Martinez had built his firm from the ground up over 20 years. He prided himself on reading people, on knowing his team, on creating a work environment where talent thrived. He could spot a good architect from a mile away, and Alex Chen was exceptional. In the 3 months since Alex had joined the firm, he'd already revolutionized their approach to green building integration. The kid was brilliant, quiet, dedicated, always the first one in and the last one out. David had plans for him, big plans. But there was something else David noticed about Alex, something he couldn't quite put his finger on. It was in the way Alex's smile never quite reached his eyes during office social events. The way he'd go silent whenever relationship talk started. The way he'd volunteered to work every single holiday, claiming his wife had family commitments elsewhere. David knew that kind of distance, that kind of careful separation between work and personal life. Because he'd lived it himself for 15 years. The photo on David's desk was real, the marriage was real, the children were real. What wasn't real, what had never been real, was his attraction to the woman he'd married at 23 because it was what everyone expected, what his family expected, what his business partners expected. He loved Rebecca, truly he did, just not in the way a husband should love a wife. They'd figured it out together 7 years ago, sitting in their kitchen at 2 a.m. after another argument about the growing distance between them. The conversation that followed had been the most honest either of them had ever had. They'd cried together, laughed together, and ultimately decided together that their family, their partnership, mattered more than the romantic fiction they'd been trying to live. Rebecca had her life, David had his, and they co-parented their children with more love and honesty than many traditional marriages ever achieved. Their kids knew, close friends knew, but the firm, the industry, that was different. David had convinced himself it was about protecting the business, about not making waves, about keeping his personal life personal. But watching Alex Chen navigate the same careful dance, he recognized the truth. It was about fear, pure and simple. Alex, got a minute? Alex looked up from his drafting table to see David Martinez standing in his office doorway. It was late, past 8 p.m., and the floor was mostly empty except for the soft hum of computers and the distant sound of the janitorial staff. Of course, Mr. Martinez. David, please, we're way past formalities at this point. David stepped into the office and Alex noticed he looked tired. No, not tired, weary. I wanted to talk to you about the Greenway project. The Greenway project was Alex's baby, a massive sustainable housing development that could reshape Seattle's approach to urban living. Alex had poured his soul into the proposal. Is there a problem with the designs? Alex asked, trying to keep the anxiety out of his voice. Problem, Alex, it's brilliant, possibly the best work I've seen in a decade. David pulled up a chair, sitting across from Alex rather than standing over him. The city council loved it. We're moving forward. I want you to be the lead architect, full creative control. Alex's heart soared. This was everything. Thank you, I don't know what to say. Say you'll accept, though fair warning, it's going to consume your life for the next year. Late nights, weekend work, constant meetings. David paused, his expression shifting to something almost concerned. I know how hard you already work, how much time you already spend here. I just want to make sure your wife is okay with the commitment. There it was again, the lie coming home to roost. She understands the demands of the job, Alex said automatically. David studied him for a long moment and Alex felt exposed under that gaze, like David could see straight through the carefully constructed fiction. Alex, can I tell you something, off the record just between us? Alex nodded, unsure where this was going. I've been in this business a long time, and I've learned that the work we do, creating spaces where people live their lives, it requires us to be whole, to be authentic. David looked down at his hands. It's hard to design spaces for people to be themselves in when you're not being yourself. The words hung in the air between them, heavy with implication. I'm not sure I understand what you mean, Alex said carefully. David looked up and there was something raw in his eyes. Don't you? The moment stretched between them, electric and terrifying. Alex's mind raced. Was David saying what Alex thought he was saying, or was this a test, a trap? Before Alex could formulate a response, David's phone buzzed. He glanced at it and sighed. I should take this, think about the Greenway project, let me know tomorrow. He left and Alex sat in his office, heart pounding, feeling like the ground beneath him had shifted in some fundamental way. The next 3 months were a blur of work, creativity, and something else, something that felt dangerous and exhilarating in equal measure. David and Alex worked closely on the Greenway project, often staying late into the night, reviewing designs, debating materials, pushing each other to think bigger and bolder. And somewhere in those late nights, in the honest conversations about architecture and vision and creating spaces for authentic living, the wall Alex had built began to crack. He started to notice things about David, the way he'd roll up his sleeves when he was deep in thought, revealing forearms still strong despite his 50 years, the silver threading through his dark hair, the rare, genuine smile that transformed his entire face when something truly pleased him. And the way David looked at him sometimes, like he was seeing all the parts of Alex that Alex tried so hard to hide. It terrified him, because Alex had been down this road before. In college with his roommate Marcus. The connection, the chemistry, the late nights that turned into more. And then the devastating aftermath when Marcus's family found out, when Marcus chose them over everything they'd built together. When Alex learned that loving someone wasn't enough if they weren't brave enough to love you back in the light of day. He'd sworn after Marcus that he wouldn't do it again, wouldn't fall for someone who had to hide, wouldn't be someone's secret. And yet, here he was, working late on a Friday night, intensely aware of David's presence beside him as they reviewed the latest iterations of the project. This is it, David said softly, staring at the holographic model projected above Alex's desk. This is the future of urban living. You've created something remarkable, Alex. We created it, Alex corrected. Your insights on the community spaces, the way you pushed me to think about multi-generational living. I gave suggestions, you brought it to life. David turned to look at him and they were close, so close that Alex could see the flecks of gold in David's brown eyes. You have an incredible gift. So do you, Alex said quietly. You see things other people miss, you see. He trailed off, but the unspoken words hung between them. You see me. David's hand moved, reaching out, and for one heart-stopping moment, Alex thought he might touch his face. But David's phone buzzed, Rebecca calling, the screen said, and the moment shattered. David stepped back, answering the call with the easy warmth of long familiarity. "Hey, love, yeah, I'm still at the office. I'll be home in an hour." Alex turned back to his computer, but he couldn't focus on the designs anymore. All he could think about was how much it hurt to want someone he couldn't have. It started with something small, as these things often do. Alex was at the coffee shop near the office waiting for his order when he heard a familiar laugh. He turned and saw David at a corner table with a woman who was clearly his wife, the same woman from the photos in his office. But they weren't sitting like a married couple, they were sitting like friends. Good friends, certainly, but there was something missing in the body language. No casual touches, no intimate proximity. And then a young man approached their table, early 20s, stylishly dressed, and both David and Rebecca lit up. David hugged him tightly, and the resemblance was clear. This was their son. But as Alex watched their interaction, something clicked into place. The son was gay, obviously, comfortably, clearly gay. And David and Rebecca weren't just accepting, they were celebrating, laughing at something he said, completely at ease. Alex grabbed his coffee and left before they could see him, but his mind was reeling. If David was that comfortable with his son being gay, why was he living this double life? Why the pretense? Unless David wasn't living a double life at all, unless the marriage itself was something different than what Alex had assumed. That night, Alex did something he'd avoided for months. He Googled David Martinez, not the professional bio which he knew by heart, but deeper, personal stuff. What he found was complicated. There were the expected things: charity events with Rebecca, family photos, the perfect image of a successful Seattle couple. But there were also gaps. No couple photos after about 7 years ago. Separate social media accounts that barely referenced each other. And then buried in an article about LGBTQ+ advocacy in the Seattle business community, a quote from Rebecca Martinez about supporting her children in living their authentic truths. Children plural. Alex dug deeper and found it, a photo from 5 years ago at a Pride event. David's oldest daughter holding a sign that read, "My dad taught me to be proud of who I am." And there, in the background, slightly out of focus but unmistakable, David himself wearing a Pride flag pin. Alex sat back, staring at his computer screen, his entire understanding of the situation rearranging itself. David wasn't hiding, not really, he just wasn't broadcasting. And suddenly Alex had to know, had to understand. The next day Alex found his courage. "David, can we talk, outside of work?" David looked up from his desk, surprise flickering across his face. "Of course, everything okay?" "I'm not sure," Alex admitted, "but I think we need to have an honest conversation, a really honest conversation." Something shifted in David's expression, recognition, maybe, or resignation. "My house, tomorrow, 7 p.m., Rebecca will be there. I think it's time you met her properly." This was not what Alex expected, but he nodded. "Okay." David and Rebecca's house was beautiful, a modern architectural marvel tucked into the hills overlooking the city. Rebecca opened the door and she was warm and welcoming in a way that immediately put Alex at ease. "You must be Alex. David talks about you constantly, the Greenway genius, right?" She ushered him in. "He's in the kitchen pretending he can cook. I give it 10 minutes before he orders takeout." "I heard that," David called from deeper in the house. Rebecca laughed and guided Alex to the kitchen, where David was indeed struggling with something on the stove. The scene was so domestic, so comfortable, and yet so clearly not romantic. Over dinner takeout, as Rebecca predicted, they talked, and slowly, carefully, David and Rebecca told Alex their story. The marriage that started as love but became friendship. The mutual realization that they were both living half-lives. The decision to stay together for the kids but to give each other the freedom to find happiness. The gradual coming out process, first to family, then to close friends, and eventually, in their own ways, to a larger circle. "But why not at work?" Alex asked David. "Your son is out, your daughter is out. Rebecca advocates for LGBTQ+ causes publicly, why not you?" David was quiet for a long moment. "Fear mostly. The business world can be brutal even now. I told myself I was protecting the firm, protecting our clients, protecting the bottom line." He met Alex's eyes. but really I was just protecting myself from being seen. And lately, Rebecca added gently, he's been realizing that protection feels more like a prison. There was a weight to the way she said it, and the way she looked at David when she did. Alex, David said carefully, why did you ask to have this conversation? This was it, the moment Alex had been simultaneously running toward and away from for months. Because I saw you at the coffee shop with Rebecca and your son, and I realized I'd made assumptions, and those assumptions meant I've been lying too. Alex took a breath. I'm not married, I've never been married, the ring I wear was my grandmother's. When people assumed I had a wife, I just let them because it felt safer than correcting them. Oh, Alex, Rebecca said softly. I'm gay, Alex continued, and saying it out loud to David in this context felt like stepping off a cliff. And I've been falling for my boss for months, which is wildly inappropriate and probably grounds for firing me, but I can't keep pretending anymore. I can't keep building walls when what I really want is to be seen, David finished, really seen. Yes, Alex whispered. The silence that followed felt infinite. Then Rebecca stood, I'm going to give you two some privacy. Alex, it was lovely meeting you, really. She squeezed David's shoulder as she passed. Be brave, both of you. After she left, David and Alex sat across from each other at the dining table, the remains of dinner between them, the weight of everything unspoken pressing down. I need you to understand something, David said finally. When you started at the firm, I saw something in you, incredible talent, yes, but also something familiar, the way you held yourself apart, the careful way you navigated conversations. I recognized it because I'd been doing it for decades. When did you know, Alex asked, about me? I suspected from the beginning, but I knew for sure about 2 months in. You were working late and I walked past your office. You had headphones in and didn't know I was there. You were looking at something on your phone and your whole face just lit up. The expression you had, it was the look of someone who finally gets to be themselves, even if just for a moment. And when I looked closer, you were watching a coming out video, some kid telling their story. Alex remembered that night, remembered finding that video and feeling seen in a way that was both comforting and devastating. I wanted to say something, David continued. But what could I say? Hey, I noticed you're gay and hiding it like I've been hiding for years. I'm your boss. It would have been inappropriate, possibly predatory. And now, Alex asked, his heart hammering. Now you're sitting in my house, having met my wife, having told me the truth. The power dynamic is still there and we have to be careful about that. But Alex, David reached across the table, stopping just short of touching Alex's hand. I haven't felt this way about anyone in longer than I can remember. And it's not just attraction, though God knows that's there, it's the way you think, the way you see the world, the way you push me to be better. I don't want to be someone's secret, Alex said, and his voice cracked on the words. I did that once before and it nearly destroyed me. I don't want to be a secret either, not anymore. David's hand moved the final inch, covering Alex's. I'm 50 years old and I'm tired of being afraid. If we do this, and I'm not saying we rush into anything, but if we do this, I want to do it right, honestly, out in the open. What about the firm? What about it? It's my firm, and if anyone has a problem with me being with another man, they can find somewhere else to work. David's jaw set with determination. Though we will need to be careful about the workplace dynamics, your career, your projects, they need to be based on merit, not our relationship. I wouldn't want it any other way, Alex said. They sat there, hands clasped across the table, the city lights twinkling through the windows behind them. So what now? Alex asked. David smiled, and it was that rare, genuine smile that transformed his face. Now, we take it slow, we figure it out together, we stop hiding. But life has a way of forcing your hand when you're not ready. 2 weeks later, Alex was working late at the office. Really late, past midnight, trying to finalize some details on the Greenway project before the big presentation to the investors. He'd sent David home hours ago, insisting he could handle the finishing touches. The archives room on the 3rd floor had the old blueprints and material samples he needed for reference. Alex had just found what he was looking for when he heard footsteps in the hallway. His first thought was security making rounds, but then he heard voices, 2 of them slurred, drunk. Telling you Martinez is hiding something, I can feel it. Alex froze. That was Gerard Hutchins, one of the senior partners, a man who'd made more than one homophobic comment disguised as a joke in Alex's presence. You're paranoid, the second voice said. Tom Brennan, another partner. David's been married for 25 years. So, that doesn't mean anything anymore. You see how he's been acting lately, distracted, secretive, and always with that new architect. What's his name? Chen. Alex's blood ran cold. They work together on that big project. Of course they're spending time together. It's more than that. I've seen the way Martinez looks at him. Gerard's voice dripped with disdain. If he's doing what I think he's doing, it's disgusting, and it's going to destroy this firm's reputation. You're drunk and imagining things. Am I? Because I'm going to find out, and if I'm right, I'm calling an emergency board meeting. Morality clause in the partnership agreement. We can force him out. The voices faded as they moved down the hallway, but Alex stood paralyzed in the dark archives room, his hands shaking. This was what he'd feared, why he'd hidden for so long. The casual hatred, the threats, the idea that love could be used as a weapon to destroy someone's life's work. He needed to warn David. Alex pulled out his phone and called. It rang 4 times before David's sleepy voice answered. Alex, it's almost 1 in the morning, what's wrong? Gerard knows or suspects. He was just here drunk with Tom talking about you, about us. He's planning to use the morality clause to force you out of the firm. There was a long silence on the other end of the line. David. I'm here, I'm just processing. A rustling sound like David was sitting up in bed. What exactly did he say? Alex relayed the conversation, and with each word, he felt the future they'd barely begun to build crumbling. I'm sorry, Alex said when he finished. This is my fault if I hadn't. Stop, David said firmly. This is not your fault. Gerard's bigotry is not your fault. And you know what? I'm done hiding because of people like him. David, you could lose everything. I could lose you, David countered. I could lose the chance to actually be happy, to live authentically. And what's the point of building an empire if I have to pretend to be someone I'm not to keep it? But the firm is mine. I built it. And yes, Gerard and Tom and the others are partners, but I still have controlling interest. They want to play hardball with the morality clause? Fine, let's see how that works out for them. You can't be serious. Alex, I have been living half a life for 50 years. 50 years of doing what was expected, being who people wanted me to be, playing it safe. And you know what I have to show for it? A successful business, yes. But also a marriage that's a friendship, relationships with my kids that I had to rebuild because I'd been lying to them and myself, and a constant, knowing feeling that I'm watching my real life happen to someone else. David's voice grew stronger, more certain. You asked me 2 weeks ago what we do now. Here's what we do. We stop letting fear make our decisions. We stop giving people like Gerard power over us. We live our lives in the open and let the chips fall where they may. Alex felt something unlock in his chest, a tightness he hadn't even realized was there. You're sure? I've never been more sure of anything. Then what do we do? Tomorrow we go to work together and we stop hiding. The next morning, Alex picked David up at his house. Rebecca met them at the door with coffee and knowing looks. You're doing this, she said. It wasn't a question. We're doing this, David confirmed. She hugged him tightly. I'm proud of you, terrified but proud. She turned to Alex. Take care of him. I will, Alex promised. They arrived at the office at 8 a.m., early enough that most of the staff wasn't in yet, but late enough that a few people would see them walk in together. David parked in his usual spot, and as they walked toward the entrance, he took Alex's hand. It was such a simple gesture, fingers interlacing palm against palm, but it felt revolutionary. You okay? David asked. Alex squeezed his hand, terrified but yes. They walked through the lobby like that, hand in hand, nodding good morning to the security guard whose eyes widened but who professionally nodded back. Into the elevator, up to the 5th floor where the executive offices were. Jennifer from accounting saw them first. Her eyes dropped to their joined hands and her expression cycled through surprise, confusion, and then, to Alex's relief, a warm smile. Good morning, gentlemen. Good morning, Jennifer, David said calmly. By the time they reached David's office, Alex could feel the whispers starting, the sideways looks, the attention. Are you sure about this? Alex asked one more time, giving David an out. David answered by pulling Alex into his office and kissing him. It was brief, chaste, but deliberate. Then he turned to his computer and pulled up the company-wide email system. "What are you doing?" "What I should have done years ago." David typed quickly, his fingers steady on the keys. When he finished, he turned the monitor so Alex could read it. To the entire team at Martinez and Associates, asterisk. "I'm writing to share something personal that is long overdue. I am a gay man. I have been for my entire life, though I've only recently found the courage to live that truth openly and authentically. Some of you may know that my wife Rebecca and I have a loving partnership and family, though our marriage is not traditional in the romantic sense. We have built a life together based on friendship, respect, and mutual support, and she has my eternal gratitude for her grace and understanding as we've both navigated our own paths to authenticity. I'm also writing to tell you that I am in a relationship with Alex Chen, our senior project manager. This relationship began after months of working together closely on the Greenway project, and it developed naturally from mutual respect and admiration into something deeper. We have been careful to maintain professional boundaries, and Alex's incredible work on the Greenway project stands entirely on its own merit. I know some of you may have questions or concerns. I'm happy to address them, but I want to be clear, this is who I am, this is my life, and I'm done apologizing for it. I built this firm on the principles of innovation, integrity, and creating spaces where people can live authentically. It's time I lived up to those principles in my own life. If anyone has concerns about this situation, my door is always open. With respect and honesty, David Martinez asterisk. Holy shit, Alex breathed. Too much? David asked, his hand hovering over the send button. No, it's perfect, but David, the fallout. Let it come, David. Click send. The email hit the company system at 8:47 a.m. By 9:15, David's office phone was ringing off the hook. The first call was from Rebecca. "I'm so fucking proud of you," she said, and David could hear tears in her voice. The second was from David's oldest daughter. "About damn time, Dad, we've been waiting for you to do this for years." The third through 20th were a mix: supportive colleagues, confused employees asking for clarification, and two angry partners demanding an immediate meeting. Gerard Hutchins stormed into David's office at 10 a.m., Tom Brennan close behind. "What the hell do you think you're doing?" Gerard spat. "That email is going to destroy everything we've built." "Good morning, Gerard." "Tom." David remained seated calm. Alex stood beside him, their united front unmistakable. "I assume you're referring to my decision to live honestly." "Don't play games. You're having a relationship with an employee. That's a conflict of interest at minimum, potentially sexual harassment." "Alex and I are both consenting adults," David interrupted. "Our relationship developed organically and outside of working hours. I've already consulted with our employment attorney, and there's nothing illegal or against company policy about our relationship." "The morality clause," Tom started. "Ah yes, the morality clause." David pulled out a folder from his desk. "I've been reviewing that. It specifies behavior that brings the firm into disrepute through illegal or flagrantly unethical acts. Being in a same-sex relationship is neither illegal nor unethical. If you're suggesting it is, well, that sounds like discrimination to me, and that actually would be illegal." Gerard's face turned red. "You can't be serious. You're going to throw away 20 years of business relationships, client trust, our reputation in the industry. For what? For being honest? For being happy?" David stood now, and there was steel in his voice. "Gerard, if our clients have a problem with me being gay, they're not clients I want. If our reputation is built on me pretending to be someone I'm not, it's a false reputation. And if our business relationships can't survive the truth of who I am, they weren't real relationships to begin with." "This is insane," Gerard said. "Tom, back me up here." Tom was quiet for a long moment, then he said, "Actually, Gerard, I think we should go." He looked at David. "We need time to process this, but for what it's worth, the work you and Alex have done on the Greenway project is extraordinary. That hasn't changed." After they left, David sat down heavily. Alex knelt beside his chair. "That was incredible," Alex said. "That was terrifying," David corrected, "and it's probably just the beginning." He was right. The next 72 hours were chaos. 3 of the firm's oldest clients called to cancel their contracts, citing concerns about the firm's direction. 2 employees quit, both citing religious objections to David's lifestyle choice. Gerard Hutchins began calling other partners, trying to build support for forcing David out. But something else happened too. 5 new clients reached out, specifically saying they wanted to work with a firm led by someone with the courage to be authentic. A dozen employees, some of whom Alex had never suspected were LGBTQ+, came to David's office to thank him for his courage and share their own stories. A major architecture publication called, wanting to do a feature on the changing face of leadership in the industry. And the Greenway project? The city council moved up the timeline, wanting to fast-track it as an example of Seattle's commitment to inclusive, sustainable development. Jennifer from accounting organized a company-wide meeting where she surprisingly became David's fiercest advocate. "I've worked here for 12 years, she told the assembled staff. "I've seen David build this firm with integrity and vision. The fact that he's gay doesn't change that. If anything, it proves he's got more integrity than any of us realized. It takes guts to tell the truth when it might cost you everything." By the end of the week, when the votes came in on Gerard's attempt to oust David, it wasn't even close. The other partners sided with David 8-2, with several of them expressing disappointment in Gerard's handling of the situation. Gerard resigned the following Monday. Tom stayed but apologized privately to both David and Alex. Through it all, Alex watched David handle the crisis with grace, strength, and an openness that took Alex's breath away. This was the man David was when he wasn't hiding, confident, authentic, unapologetically himself. And Alex fell even more deeply in love. But he also understood now what David had been protecting himself from. The hatred was real. The consequences were real. The risk was enormous. One night, as they sat in David's office after everyone else had gone home, Alex voiced his concerns. "Do you regret it, sending that email?" David was quiet for a moment, staring out the window at the Seattle skyline. "No, even with everything that's happened, the lost clients, the anger, the ugliness, no, because for the first time in my life I'm not performing. I'm not calculating every word, every gesture, every interaction. I'm just being." He turned to Alex. "You asked me once why I stayed closeted when my kids were out. The truth? I was afraid of losing the empire I'd built, but empires built on lies are just fancy prisons, and I don't want to be emperor of a prison anymore." "What do you want?" Alex asked. David crossed the room and took Alex's hands. "I want to design buildings with you. I want to have dinner with you without worrying who sees us. I want to introduce you to people as my partner, not my colleague. I want to wake up next to you and not have to construct a story about where I was." He paused. "I want a life that's real." "That sounds terrifying," Alex said. "It is, but it also sounds like freedom." Which brings us back to that rainy Thursday night 3 months later. 11:47 p.m., the archives room, David standing in the doorway, frozen. But not because of what he'd discovered about Alex, because of what he'd discovered about himself. Let me fill in what really happened. David had come back to the office late that night because he'd forgotten his phone. The Greenway project presentation was the next morning, the final pitch to secure the massive investment that would make it a reality. He was nervous, excited, and couldn't sleep, so he'd driven back to the office to review his notes one more time. He'd seen the light on in the archives room and assumed it was the cleaning crew. But when he opened the door, he found Alex sitting on the floor, surrounded by old blueprints and photographs from the firm's early days. Alex looked up, tears streaming down his face. "Alex," David rushed in, kneeling beside him. "What's wrong? What happened?" Alex held up a photograph. It was from the firm's founding 20 years ago. David and his original 3 partners at the ribbon-cutting ceremony, young, ambitious, ready to conquer the world. "I found these while looking for the old sustainable housing proposals," Alex said, his voice thick. "And I started looking through them. 20 years of your work, David, 20 years of brilliant, innovative, beautiful work, and you know what I realized?" "What?" "There's not a single building in this entire archive that has your soul in it." Alex gestured at the blueprints spread around them. "They're all technically perfect, commercially successful, but they're missing something. It's like you were designing buildings for the person you were pretending to be, not the person you actually are." David stared at the blueprints, and the truth of Alex's words hit him like a physical blow. "But the Greenway project," Alex continued, now pulling out their recent designs, "this is different. This has your heart in it, your real heart. Do you see it?" David looked at the designs they'd created together over the past months. Alex was right. The community spaces that encouraged gathering and authenticity, the multi-generational housing that acknowledged that families come in all forms, the public areas designed to celebrate diversity rather than enforce conformity. I designed what I wish I'd had, David realized, spaces where people could be themselves. Exactly, Alex wiped his eyes, and you know what that made me think about.
What?
How much time I've wasted, how many years I spent hiding, being afraid, denying myself the chance to create something real. Alex looked at David with such intensity it was almost painful. I don't want to waste any more time, not a single day. David pulled Alex into his arms and they sat there on the floor of the archives room, surrounded by the evidence of David's hidden past and the promise of their open future. Tomorrow we're going to walk into that presentation, David said. And we're going to pitch the Greenway project as partners, full partners, not just professionally but personally. I'm going to tell those investors exactly who you are to me and what we've built together. David, you don't have to. I want to because you're right. I'm done creating things that don't have my soul in them, and my soul is in this project because you're in this project, and I'm not hiding that. The next morning's presentation was the stuff of legend in Seattle architecture circles. David and Alex stood before the investors, a room full of conservative, traditional business people, and David opened not with statistics or projections but with a story. 20 years ago, I founded this firm on a lie, he began. Not about my capabilities or my vision, but about who I was as a person. I thought I had to hide parts of myself to be successful, to be respected, to be trusted with your money and your projects. The room was dead silent. But 6 months ago, I met someone who changed everything. Alex Chen is the most talented architect I've ever worked with. He's also the person I'm in love with. And together we've created something that I could never have created while I was hiding. Project that doesn't just house people but honors them, all of them, regardless of who they love, how they identify, what their family looks like, or how they choose to live their lives. David clicked to the first slide. The Greenway project isn't just sustainable housing, it's a statement that everyone deserves a home where they can be authentically themselves, where they don't have to hide, where they don't have to perform, where they can just live. For the next hour, David and Alex presented their vision. The innovative sustainable technologies, the community integration, the economic models. But more than that, they presented a philosophy that good design comes from authentic living and authentic living comes from the courage to be seen. When they finished, there was a long silence. Then the lead investor, a silver-haired woman in her 60s, stood up. Mr. Martinez, Mr. Chen, I have one question. David braced himself, of course. When can we start? The room erupted in applause. Epilogue 1 year later. The Greenway project broke ground on a sunny Saturday in June. Half of Seattle seemed to turn out for the ceremony: investors, city officials, future residents, and the entire staff of Martinez and Associates. David stood at the podium, Alex beside him, and looked out at the crowd. A year ago, he began, I was asked what I wanted, and I said I wanted a life that was real. Today, I'm standing here with the man I love, about to build something that will outlast both of us. Something that will provide homes for thousands of people. Something that says loudly and clearly that everyone deserves a place to belong. He looked at Alex, who smiled back at him with that open, unguarded expression that still made David's heart skip. I spent 50 years building walls, David continued. Now I'm spending the rest of my life building homes, and I've learned that there's a difference. Walls are about keeping people out, homes are about inviting people in. After the ceremony, as the crowd mingled and celebrated, Rebecca found David and Alex. She hugged them both. I'm so proud of you both, she said. You changed your lives, and in doing that you're going to change a lot of other lives too. David's children were there too, all three of them. His oldest daughter raised her champagne glass to Dad and Alex for having the courage to build something real. To building something real, everyone echoed. That night, David and Alex stood at the construction site alone, looking at the empty space that would soon hold their shared vision. Do you ever wish we'd done this sooner? Alex asked. Found each other sooner, been brave sooner. David considered the question. Sometimes, but I also think we found each other exactly when we were supposed to. I needed to be ready, you needed to be ready, and now we are. Are you scared, Alex asked, of what comes next? Terrified, David admitted, but also excited, also hopeful, also grateful. He took Alex's hand. Fear doesn't go away just because you're brave, you just get better at doing things even though you're scared. When did you get so wise? When I met someone worth being brave for. They stood there as the sun set over Seattle, two men who'd spent years hiding in the shadows, now standing openly in the light. The future was uncertain. There would be more challenges, more obstacles, more people who didn't understand or approve. But they would face it together, openly, honestly, authentically. Building homes, not walls. Living real lives, not performed ones. And that ultimately was worth any risk. Author's note. This story is about courage, but not the kind we usually celebrate. It's not about grand gestures or dramatic moments, though those are here too. It's about the quiet, everyday courage of being yourself when the world makes it easier to hide. For David, that courage came late in life after decades of playing it safe. For Alex, it came in refusing to repeat the pattern of invisibility he'd learned to survive with. For both of them, it came in choosing vulnerability over protection, truth over comfort, love over fear. If you're reading this and you're hiding some part of yourself, your identity, your dreams, your truth, please know you deserve to be seen. You deserve spaces where you can be authentic. You deserve people who love you for who you really are, not who you pretend to be. And yes, being seen is scary, the risks are real, but so are the rewards. Build homes, not walls. Live real lives, not performed ones. Be brave even when you're scared. Especially when you're scared. Because that's when it matters most. The end.